Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through the hidden secrets of the Fallout Wasteland. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what games you want me to cover next. And subscribe if this helps you sleep. Vault-Tec's original deception. Vault-Tec wasn't created to save humanity from nuclear war. The company was established in 2054 as a legitimate construction firm, building underground shelters for the ultra-wealthy. It wasn't until they secured a government contract in 2063 that their purpose shifted. The US government, knowing nuclear war was inevitable, commissioned Vault-Tec to create not sanctuaries, but laboratories. Each vault would test different variables on isolated human populations. The company's executives were promised positions in control vaults, ensuring their survival, while they condemned thousands to experimental horrors. Vault-Tec's cheerful advertising campaigns, with their friendly thumbs-up mascot, were psychological operations designed to make Americans trust a company that was actively planning to use them as test subjects. The Enclave's pre-war origins. The Enclave didn't form after the bombs fell. They existed long before as a shadow government comprised of military leaders, corporate executives, and political elites. In 2073, this cabal realized nuclear war was imminent and began preparations to survive it while maintaining control of whatever emerged afterward. They established the Poseidon oil rig as their primary base, believing the Pacific Ocean would protect them from radiation. The Enclave viewed themselves as humanity's rightful inheritors, the only pure humans left after the bombs. Their ideology of genetic supremacy wasn't born in the wasteland, but cultivated in pre-war boardrooms where men in suits decided who deserved to survive and who was acceptable collateral damage in their grand experiment. Vault 11's democratic horror. Vault 11's experiment was among the most psychologically devastating in Vault-Tec's arsenal. Residents were told that one person must be sacrificed annually, or everyone would die. The Vault's computer would randomly select a sacrifice unless a candidate was democratically elected. This created a horrific political system where communities campaigned to elect enemies and rivals to death. Families formed voting blocs. Blackmail became currency. Over years, the social fabric disintegrated into paranoid tribalism. When only 5 residents remained, they refused to participate and discovered the terrible truth. The computer was programmed to congratulate them for rebelling. No one ever needed to die. Vault-Tec wanted to see if humans would cannibalize their own society through democratic process, and they succeeded beyond measure. The Master's tragic realization. The Master, formerly Richard Gray, believed he was saving humanity by converting everyone into super mutants. He spent decades perfecting the forced evolutionary virus, convinced that transforming humans into a single unified species would end war, prejudice, and conflict. His telepathic unity of mind seemed like transcendent peace. But when the Vault Dweller presented evidence that super mutants were sterile, the Master's entire worldview collapsed. He hadn't been saving humanity but ending it. Every conversion was murder disguised as evolution. His final moments weren't villainous defiance, but crushing despair. Some accounts suggest he initiated his own base's self-destruct sequence, while others indicate he simply stopped defending himself, allowing his death as penance for genocide committed with the noblest of intentions. Vault 106's hallucinogenic nightmare. 10 days after Vault 106 sealed, psychoactive drugs were pumped through the ventilation system. Residents began experiencing vivid, terrifying hallucinations that felt utterly real. Parents watched their children melt. Friends became monsters. The drugs were designed to cause paranoid schizophrenia symptoms in controlled doses. Within weeks, residents were attacking perceived threats that didn't exist, killing real people to stop imaginary dangers. The vault became a labyrinth of the insane, with survivors barricading themselves in rooms, whispering to voices only they could hear. When wastelanders enter Vault 106 centuries later, residual drugs still contaminate the air, causing temporary hallucinations. The survivors left behind weren't defeated by time, but by their own minds, Vault-Tech's chemical warfare against sanity itself. Harold's ecological transformation. Harold wasn't always a tree. He was originally a caravan trader who entered Mariposa military base with Richard Gray and others in 2102. When the expedition went wrong, Harold was exposed to FEV, but his mutation took an unusual path. Unlike typical soup mutants, his transformation was gradual and unique. Sometime between 2162 and 2241, a strange plant began growing from his head, which he named Bob. The mutation wasn't from an embedded seed, but from the FEV itself, triggering this bizarre botanical growth. Over decades, Bob grew larger, eventually becoming a full tree that rooted Harold to the ground in the capital wasteland. By Fallout 3, Harold had been immobile for over 2 decades, worshipped as a deity by the tree minders at Oasis. He begged the lone wanderer to end his suffering, trapped in consciousness within a body that had become an ecosystem. Harold's fate represented post-nuclear evolution. At its most surreal, a man transformed into living forest against his will. Vault 77's puppet madness. Vault 77 contained one man and a crate of puppets. Vault-Tech wanted to study extreme isolation without human contact. The lone resident lasted years, using the puppets as surrogate companions, creating elaborate personalities and relationships. Audio logs reveal his descent into madness as puppet personas became real to him. He conducted trials where puppet juries condemned puppet criminals. He married puppet women and held puppet funerals. Eventually, reality and delusion merged completely. When he finally left the vault, he was a functional madman who saw puppets as sentient beings and treated humans with suspicion. Wastelanders who encountered him reported a man dressed in a vault suit, wearing puppet armor, speaking to himself in multiple voices while remaining an extremely efficient killer who viewed violence through the lens of puppet show morality. The Institute's synth philosophy. The Institute didn't create synths to replace humanity, but to perfect it. Their philosophy held that biological humans were flawed, prone to disease, aging, irrationality. Synths represented humanity 2.0, beings that looked human but operated with machine precision. The Institute genuinely believed they were doing humanity a favor by gradually replacing the diseased surface dwellers with improved versions. Gen 3 synths were so sophisticated they didn't know they were artificial, complete with implanted memories and emotional responses. The Institute saw no moral difference between creating a synth and birthing a child. Both were beings brought into existence. The controversy wasn't whether synths deserved rights, but whether humanity had the right to be replaced by its own creation, digital evolution, overtaking biological. Vault 92's subliminal assassination program. Vault 92 was populated with musicians to test subliminal messaging through sound. Vault-Tech embedded kill commands in white noise played during sleep. Residents were conditioned without their knowledge, training their subconscious to respond to audio triggers with violence. The experiment was designed to create sleeper agents who could be activated post-war through specific sound frequencies. Initially, everything seemed normal. Residents practiced music, performed concerts, lived apparently peaceful lives. Then Vault-Tec activated the final phase, broadcasting the kill frequency throughout the vault. Every resident simultaneously became homicidal, attacking friends and family with whatever instruments were nearby. A violin became a bludgeon. Piano wire became a garrote. The vault filled with corpses and blood, while Vault-Tec scientists recorded data on activation success rates. Nuka-Cola's radioactive addiction. Nuka-Cola wasn't just soda, but a pre-war psychological weapon disguised as refreshment. The Nuka-Cola Corporation worked with the military to develop beverages with mildly addictive properties to ensure consumer loyalty. Nuka-Cola Quantum contained radioactive isotopes that created a faint blue glow and mild euphoria, essentially making it radiation you drank voluntarily. The company marketed it as revolutionary, and consumers lined up to purchase atomic beverages. Post-war, Nuka-Cola's addictive formulas created generations of wastelanders dependent on 200-year-old soda. The radiation in Quantum actually helped some survivors adapt to the wasteland's background radiation levels, accidentally creating beneficial mutations. Nuka-Cola's corporate headquarters became a shrine to capitalist excess, a museum of how corporations convince people to literally consume poison. Vault 108's cloning catastrophe. Vault 108's cloning experiment went wrong in ways Vault-Tec didn't anticipate. The vault was designed to test rapid cloning as a population replacement strategy. When residents died, they'd be cloned, maintaining stable population numbers indefinitely. The problem was accelerated growth caused severe mental degradation. Each clone generation lost cognitive function, creating increasingly violent, simple-minded duplicates. The Gary clones, named after an early subject, became the dominant population, aggressive, territorial, and capable of only repeating their name. They weren't monsters, but tragic victims of recursive genetic decay, each generation a worse copy of the last. The vault, filled with hundreds of Garys, all slightly different, all deteriorating, fighting each other and anyone who entered their domain. A nightmare of multiplication without meaning. The Glow's scientific martyrdom. The West Tech Research Facility, later called the Glow, was where FEV was originally developed. When bombs fell, scientists inside survived briefly in underground levels, continuing their work amid catastrophic radiation. They knew they were dying but dedicated final days to documenting their research, hoping future survivors could learn from their discoveries. Their logs reveal men and women accepting death while meticulously recording experimental results, writing equations while radiation sickness destroyed their bodies. They weren't monsters or heroes, just scientists doing their jobs until the literal end. The Glow became one of the most radioactive locations in the wasteland, a tomb for people who chose knowledge over escape. Their skeletal remains still seated at terminals, eternal monument to dedication that killed them. Vault 12's controlled ghoul creation. Vault 12 in Necropolis was designed never to fully seal, exposing the residents to gradual radiation to study ghoulification. Vault-Tec wanted data on how humans transformed into ghouls. What factors influenced the process? Who became sentient ghouls versus feral? Residents didn't know their vault was defective, believing they'd survived through luck. As radiation slowly penetrated, people began changing, skin sloughing, vocal cords degrading, but minds mostly intact. The horror was watching yourself become the monsters from pre-war propaganda films, knowing you were transforming but unable to stop it. Some residents embraced their new existence. Others couldn't accept their reflection and ended themselves. The surviving ghouls built a society in the ruins, proof that humanity could persist in forms that would horrify their former selves. Deathclaws engineered evolution. Deathclaws weren't natural mutations, but pre-war military bioweapons. The US government used FEV and genetic engineering to transform Jackson's chameleons into intelligent, armored killers designed for Chinese infiltration and assassination. The project aimed to create disposable soldiers that could navigate enemy territory undetected. When bombs fell, Deathclaws escaped containment, adapting to various environments across America. Each regional variant evolved differently. The intelligent Deathclaws of Vault 13, the pack-hunting variety in the Mojave, the albino tunnelers under the Divide. They represented humanity's hubris, creating predators so perfect they dominated the post-war food chain. Every Deathclaw encounter was a reminder that the old world's weapons still hunted, and some weapons thought for themselves. Vault 81's rare altruism. Vault 81 stands unique as a vault where residents rebelled before experiments began. The vault's designated overseer, informed of the plan to test disease on residents, refused to participate. She sealed the experimental wing, preventing Vault Tech scientists from releasing pathogens. This single act of defiance saved 81's population from becoming disease vectors. The Vault thrived for over 200 years, developing a functional society with culture, economy, and continuity. By the time Wastelanders discover it, Vault 81 is one of the only fully operational vaults with happy, healthy residents. The sealed experimental wing still contains dormant bioweapons and frozen scientists who died waiting for orders that never came. Vault 81 proves that Vault-Tech's experiments weren't inevitable. One moral person in position of authority could save hundreds. The Sierra Madre's tragic imprisonment. The Sierra Madre Casino was built as a pre-war monument to technological excess, equipped with security systems that couldn't be disabled or overridden. Its architect, Frederick Sinclair, became obsessed with security after personal tragedy, creating a fortress to protect his love, Vera Keys. But Vera conspired with Dean Domino to rob the casino, leading to Sinclair's death before the grand opening. The bombs fell, triggering permanent lockdown protocols. The casino's cloud, a toxic experimental tool, leaked, killing everything nearby. The casino's holographic security never stopped patrolling. Over 200 years, the Sierra Madre became a death trap, maintaining routines for an opening night that would never occur. Its treasures locked behind systems that couldn't recognize the world had ended. Beauty preserved inside perfect prison. Synth recall code's ethical horror. Every Institute synth had a recall code, a string of words that would instantly shut them down or reprogram their behavior. For Gen 3 synths with implanted memories who believed themselves human, these codes were existential nightmares. Imagine living a full life, having dreams and fears and love. Then someone speaks specific words and your consciousness resets. You're not who you were. You might not remember your spouse or children. The Institute viewed this as system maintenance. To synths, it was death and resurrection in unknown forms. The Railroad fought to remove these codes, performing dangerous memory wipes that freed synths but destroyed their existing personalities. There were no good options. Keeping codes meant perpetual slavery. Removing them meant killing who the synth had been to save who they might become. Vault 22's fungal apocalypse. Vault 22's agricultural research seemed benign, developing plants that could survive wasteland conditions. Scientists cultivated aggressive fungal strains that could break down radioactive materials, cleaning soil for farming. The fungus worked perfectly until it evolved. It began infecting humans, using their bodies as growing medium. Infected residents transformed into shambling spore carriers, flesh, consumed by fungal growth, while consciousness remained partially intact. These spore carriers wandered the vault's overgrown levels, spreading infection. The research team realized too late they'd created a plague that could potentially consume all organic matter in the wasteland. Survivors sealed sections and fled, but the fungus waited patiently, spores remaining viable indefinitely, an ecological bomb waiting for someone to unseal Vault 22's doors and release biological horror that could end post-nuclear civilization. Mr. House's 261-year strategy. Robert House predicted nuclear war to the day, calculating October 23, 2077, as the most probable date for atomic exchange. He spent years preparing, upgrading his life support systems, positioning defenses around New Vegas, purchasing every resource needed to survive centuries. His platinum chip, containing crucial software upgrades, was delivered one day late due to courier complications, causing defensive systems to fail during the attack. This single delay, one day out of 261 years of planning, allowed several warheads to damage New Vegas. House survived but fell into coma, his body sustained by medical machines while his mind drifted for decades. When he finally regained consciousness, he'd lost precious years, his rage at courier delivery failures consuming him. One day's difference between perfect preservation and partial destruction, between immediate power and gradual reconstruction. Vault 3's deadly charity. Vault 3 operated successfully for generations, its residents living peacefully while the wasteland burned. But Vault life was monotonous, safe but stifling. Some residents advocated for opening the door, believing they could help outside survivors. After heated debate, the overseer agreed to a trial opening. The fiends, desperate raiders addicted to chems, discovered the open vault and saw opportunity. They poured in, slaughtering residents, claiming the vault as their base. The few survivors who escaped became refugees, their community destroyed by compassion. Vault 3's tragedy proved that, in the wasteland, kindness could be fatal, that the impulse to help others required weighing survival against morality. Those residents died because they believed in human goodness, and the fiends proved them fatally wrong. The Big MT's mad science loop. The think tank at Big MT represented pre-war science without ethical constraints. These scientists, their brains preserved in mechanical bodies, continued experiments for 200 years without realizing the world had ended. They abducted wastelanders, performed grotesque surgeries, created hybrid abominations, all while believing they were still working for the military. Their separation from humanity, both physical and temporal, made them sociopaths. They couldn't comprehend suffering because they couldn't feel it anymore. Each think tank member had specialized in different fields: brain, emotions, spine, now extracted and replaced with machines. They were intellect without wisdom, knowledge without conscience, innovation without purpose, endlessly experimenting because experimentation was all they remembered how to do. Vault 11's voting blocks. Before Vault 11's discovery of their experiment's truth, the Vault operated as dystopian democracy. 5 major power blocks formed. Justice Block believed in fair sacrifice rotation. Overseer Block protected sitting overseers, second-generation bloc, young residents rejecting their parents' system, independent bloc, loners who refused factional loyalty, and non-voting bloc, residents who wouldn't participate. Each bloc developed elaborate political machines. Justice bloc used propaganda emphasizing civic duty. Overseer bloc offered protection in exchange for loyalty. Second generation advocated random selection. Independents simply tried surviving without commitments. Non-voters were usually the ones elected to die, punished for refusing the system. The blocs became families, religions, tribes, proving humans will tribalize over anything, even choosing who to murder. Feral ghoul consciousness. The process of going feral isn't sudden, but gradual horror. Ghouls describe it as erosion, like memories draining away through holes in your mind. First, you forget names, then faces, then purpose. Language degrades into growls. Rational thought becomes brief moments between fog. Some ghouls feel feralism approaching and choose suicide before consciousness fully dissolves. Others fight it, clinging to routines and memories, hoping structure prevents collapse. But feralism eventually takes everyone if they live long enough. The horror is awareness during the process, knowing you're losing yourself, watching your personality disintegrate while unable to stop it. Feral ghouls aren't empty husks, but prisoners in bodies they can't control, screaming internally while their meat puppet attacks anything that moves. The Enclave's genetic purity tests. The Enclave developed criteria for measuring genetic purity, determining who was truly human and who was mutant, filth deserving extermination. Their tests measured radiation exposure, genetic markers, genealogy back to pre-war families. Anyone with even trace mutations was classified as subhuman. This included nearly everyone in the wasteland. Humans who'd adapted to survive, becoming disqualified from humanity by the very changes that kept them alive. The Enclave's FEV curling 13 virus was designed to target these mutations, killing wastelanders while leaving Enclave members unharmed. They planned global genocide disguised as cleansing, restoring America by murdering Americans, creating pure world where only their definition of human survived. They were Nazis with power armor, convinced their atrocities were patriotic duty. Vault 87's FEV horror. Vault 87 was where the US government tested FEV on vault dwellers under the pretense of immunization shots. Residents lined up willingly, believing they were being protected from radiation. Instead, they were transformed into super mutants. Their bodies warped, their minds simplified, their former identities erased. The transformation was agonizing, bones breaking and reforming, muscles tearing and rebuilding, consciousness fragmenting as brain chemistry altered. Most new mutants went violently insane during the process. Those who retained intelligence remembered being human, trapped in bodies that horrified them, voices that couldn't articulate thought. The vault became breeding ground for Capital Wasteland's super mutant population, each one a person who'd volunteered for vaccinations and gotten lobotomy with gigantism instead. The Tenpenny Tower massacre's futility. When ghouls finally gained entry to Tenpenny Tower, whether through diplomacy or violence, the outcome was always the same. Integration failed because bigotry ran too deep. If peaceful coexistence was attempted, human residents sabotaged it through harassment and violence, forcing ghouls to retaliate. If ghouls massacred residents and moved in, they couldn't escape guilt over becoming the monsters they were accused of being. Either way, Tenpenny Tower's floors ran with blood. The quest demonstrated that some prejudices couldn't be negotiated away. that centuries of hatred made compromise impossible. Whether you saved the ghouls or the humans, you participated in tragedy that had no good ending, proving the wasteland punished idealism as reliably as it punished cruelty. Vault 34's Armory Rebellion. Vault 34 was overstocked with weapons, ostensibly for dweller protection. This created gun culture, where violence became first response to disagreements. When a reactor leak threatened the vault, two factions formed, those wanting to open the vault and escape, and those believing opening the door would doom future generations. The Overseer sided with remaining sealed. The rebel faction assaulted the armory, beginning civil war in radioactive hallways. The fighting ruptured cooling systems, flooding the vault with fatal radiation. Both factions died, some from combat, others from poisoning. The vault filled with ghouls, former residents transformed by the radiation they'd fought over. Wandering flooded corridors, still clutching weapons, still territorial, fighting a war that had ended a century ago in their ghoulified minds. EDE's loneliest journey. iBot Duraframe Subject E was a prototype courier robot carrying crucial data from Adams Air Force Base to Navarro. Its journey across America should have taken weeks, but complications extended it to years. EDE broke down repeatedly, was repaired by wastelanders who had no idea what it carried, became friend to wandering traders and settlers before moving on. Its audio logs recorded kindness from strangers, humans helping a robot simply because it seemed lost. These acts of compassion toward a machine revealed humanity surviving in small moments. By the time EDE reached the Mojave, its original mission was meaningless, but the journey had documented hope. The little robot, that could have been scrapped for parts instead, became mobile chronicle of wasteland kindness, proof that even in hell, people chose gentleness. Vault 101's eternal imprisonment. Vault 101 wasn't testing anything scientific, but pure social control. Its overseer knew the world outside was survivable, but maintained the lie that leaving meant death. This required increasingly elaborate deceptions as generations passed. Outside communications had to be suppressed. Births had to be carefully regulated. Anyone questioning the narrative had to be re-educated or eliminated. The lone wanderer's father broke this control by leaving, proving survival was possible, exposing the overseer's lies. The vault fractured between those accepting truth and those clinging to comforting deception. Some residents couldn't handle revelation that they'd been imprisoned unnecessarily, that their entire lives were built on lies, that the overseer they trusted was jailer keeping them in cage with unlocked door. Centaur's agonized existence. Centaurs weren't created intentionally, but were accidents of FEV exposure. When multiple creatures were exposed to the virus simultaneously, it sometimes fused them into a single organism, combining dogs, humans, and other animals into writhing flesh amalgams. Centaurs had no unified consciousness, but competing minds trapped in shared body, each brain trying to control different parts, creating lurching, uncoordinated movement. They couldn't communicate or think clearly, existing in state of perpetual confusion and pain. The master kept them as guards, but they were too unstable for most purposes. Postmaster, centaurs wandered aimlessly, biological nightmares that attacked anything nearby, not from malice, but from constant agony seeking release through violence. Creatures that should never have existed, living arguments against human meddling with evolution. Liberty Prime's propaganda processing. Liberty Prime was more than giant robot, but mobile, propaganda platform. Its programming, included thousands of anti-communist slogans, historical reinterpretations, and patriotic rhetoric designed to demoralize Chinese forces. Each phrase was focus group tested for maximum psychological impact. The robot's AI was sophisticated enough to generate new slogans combining approved phrases, creating endless variations on American exceptionalism. Its dramatic voice and massive size made every statement sound authoritative. Propaganda, weaponized through spectacle. When the Brotherhood deployed it, Liberty Prime hadn't been updated since pre-war, still fighting Cold War enemies with Cold War rhetoric, oblivious that everyone was American now, and capitalism and communism were equally dead. The robot was Temporal Ghost, re-fighting finished wars with sincere enthusiasm, too programmed to understand absurdity. Vault 19's red and blue paranoia. Vault 19 split its population into two groups, red and blue, given separate living areas with minimal contact. Vault-Tec wanted to study factional paranoia development. Initially, the division was arbitrary, meaningless. But humans need tribal identity. Within months, red and blue sectors developed distinct cultures, customs, and mutual suspicion. Rumors spread about the other side hoarding resources, planning betrayals. Both groups believed themselves victims of the other's scheming. Eventually, Vault-Tec stopped the experiment to prevent violence, but the damage persisted. Even after integration attempts, Reds and Blues couldn't trust each other. Their children inherited ancestral feuds based on Vault assignments. The experiment proved human tribalism required no actual differences, just labels and separation. We'll find reasons to hate each other given the slightest excuse. Synth Retention Bureau's hunting. The Institute's Synth Retention Bureau specialized in tracking escaped synths and either retrieving them or terminating them as failed products. Their courses were the Bureau's elite hunters, enhanced synths programmed to feel nothing while hunting their own kind. To coursers, rogue synths weren't people, but a malfunctioning equipment requiring repossession. They tracked with inhuman efficiency, understanding synthetic psychology perfectly because they shared it. The Bureau maintained files on every synth, noting personality quirks, probable destinations, likely behaviors. When coursers found rogues, they offered one chance to return peacefully. Resistance meant immediate execution. The Bureau's existence terrorized escaped synths, making freedom feel temporary. Every stranger potentially a courser. Every peaceful day possibly their last. They couldn't fully escape because part of them was still Institute property, and the Institute never stopped collecting what belonged to them. Vault 75's Child Soldier Program. Vault 75 was populated with children and a cadre of scientists. When the door sealed, adults told children their parents died in the war, making the Vault their only family. Scientists subjected kids to intense physical training and genetic testing, identifying superior specimens. Children who excelled received praise and privileges. Those who underperformed disappeared, supposedly transferred to other vaults, but actually euthanized. The program aimed to breed super soldiers through genetic selection and brutal conditioning. Survivors grew up knowing only competition and violence, seeing peers as threats rather than friends. When the strongest children discovered the truth about disappeared friends, they killed the scientists and fought each other for control. Decades of indoctrination ensuring they couldn't conceive of cooperation. The Vault, filled with corpses of enhanced children who'd been trained too well to kill and not enough to live. Ghouls' immortal loneliness. Ghouls don't age after transformation, potentially living forever if they avoid feralism. This sounds like gift but becomes curse. Every ghoul watches everyone they love grow old and die. They make new friends who also die. They live through generations, accumulating centuries of grief. Some ghouls embrace immortality, becoming historians preserving pre-war knowledge. Others grow weary, no longer fearing death, but longing for it, tired of endless continuation. A few become monsters, not from radiation, but from emotional exhaustion. Feralism, a mercy that ends unbearable consciousness. The oldest ghouls remember the world before, carrying memories no one else shares. Walking encyclopedias of dead civilization. Their immortality isolates them temporally, stuck between past they can't return to and future they can't embrace, forever displaced from when they belong. The survivalist desert vigil. Randall Clark survived the Great War in Zion Canyon, watching his family burn in distant mushroom clouds. He spent decades in the wilderness, hunting, gathering, and slowly losing his mind to isolation. When tribals arrived in Zion, he watched from shadows, leaving supplies, protecting them without revealing himself. They thought he was spirit, calling him the Father. Clark couldn't bear contact after losing everyone, but he couldn't abandon people who needed help. His cave contained journals chronicling slow decay of his mental health, loneliness eating him despite proximity to others. When he finally died, tribals found his body and created religion around him. The survivalist became guardian angel of Zion, never knowing the difference he made, never experiencing community he sacrificed himself to preserve. Lone protector who lived and died alone. Vault 69's gender imbalance. According to the Fallout Bible and various references throughout the series, Vault 69 was sealed with an extreme gender imbalance. Reportedly, 999 women and 1 man. While the full details of what transpired remain somewhat murky, the experiment apparently aimed to study genetic diversity, bottlenecking, and social dynamics under these unusual circumstances. Based on fragmented records, the lone man likely became a source of conflict, pregnancies, and social reorganization as the Vault developed its own unique systems. The society that emerged could have evolved into a complex matriarchy, though the specifics of how this community functioned are largely left to interpretation. When traders eventually made contact with Vault 69, they would have encountered a culture that had developed distinctive customs and values shaped by generations of this unusual demographic situation. 3 Dogs propaganda mission. Eschim 3 Dog wasn't just radio DJ, but active PSYOP operator for the Brotherhood of Steel. His broadcasts seemed random wastelander entertainment, but careful listening reveals consistent pro-Brotherhood messaging, anti-enclave rhetoric, and strategic intelligence gathering disguised as news. 3 Dog's flamboyant personality was calculated to seem trustworthy and relatable. He reported listener submissions, creating crowdsourced intelligence network feeding Brotherhood leadership. His famous sign-off, "Fight the good fight," was recruitment slogan. Every broadcast reinforced narratives beneficial to Brotherhood interests. Yet, 3 Dog genuinely believed in his mission, convinced he was helping people by amplifying Brotherhood ideology. He wasn't cynical operative but true believer, which made him more effective. Wastelanders trusted him because his passion felt authentic, not realizing they were consuming carefully crafted propaganda designed to influence their behavior. Vault 21's gambling government. Vault 21 decided all disputes through gambling. Court cases, resource allocation, even leadership positions were determined by games of chance. This created society where luck was divine. where random chance replaced justice. Skilled gamblers accumulated power regardless of competence. Important decisions were made by dice rolls and card draws. When House took over, he didn't eliminate the gambling culture, but commercialized it, filling the vault with concrete and converting it into casino. The residents who'd lived by chance found themselves employed in tourist trap version of their culture. Their sacred randomness became entertainment for wealthy visitors. House destroyed the vault's lower levels to prevent anyone from discovering Vault Tech's experiment details, erasing history beneath literally tons of concrete, burying evidence of yet another twisted social experiment beneath the foundation of New Vegas's hospitality industry. Deacon's identity crisis, railroad operative. Deacon claimed dozens of different backstories, each contradicting the last. He said he was synth, then claimed he lied about being synth, then hinted he actually might be synth after all. His real history, if it existed, drowned in fabrication. This wasn't personality quirk, but survival mechanism. Deacon had learned that having no authentic identity meant never being truly caught. If enemies couldn't determine who he really was, they couldn't leverage his past against him. But the cost was dissolution of self. After years of lying, Deacon didn't remember his truth anymore. He'd become the masks he wore, collection of personas without core identity. The railroad valued his skills, but his fellow agents wondered if Deacon was anyone at all anymore, or just lying reflex in human shape, compulsive fabricator who'd forgotten what honesty felt like. Vault 108's Gary clones degradation. The Gary clones in Vault 108 weren't initially mindless. Early generation clones were intelligent, functional people who happened to share a name and face. But each successive clone generation inherited accumulated genetic errors, causing progressive mental decline. 7th generation Garys could hold conversations. 15th generation communicated in sentence fragments. 30th generation managed only their name. By the time Wastelanders discovered Vault 108, the final Gary generations were territorial animals wearing Vault suits, capable of using weapons through muscle memory, but incapable of abstract thought. Some retained fragments of earlier intelligence, creating heartbreaking moments where a Gary would say something comprehensible before relapsing into name repetition. They weren't monsters, but cautionary tale about recursive cloning. Each generation's slightly worse copy, degrading toward thoughtlessness. The Triggermans irradiated loyalty. The Triggermen of Good Neighbor were originally pre-war mobsters who'd survived in Vault 114 and emerged with distinctly outdated values. They maintained 1950s mob aesthetics, speaking in period slang, dressing in pinstripe suits and fedoras despite absurdity in wasteland context. Their loyalty to each other bordered on pathological, dying for bosses they barely knew, because that's what wise guys did. Radiation had preserved their bodies, but froze their culture in amber of black and white gangster films. They couldn't adapt to wasteland reality, running protection rackets in Ruin City, enforcing territory disputes with Tommy guns, treating apocalypse like turf war. Their inflexibility made them predictable, but also dangerous, fanatics to code nobody else followed, living anachronisms who'd rather die than update their worldview. Vault 95's cruel rehabilitation. Vault 95 was rehabilitation facility for chem addicts, sealed just as residents completed successful recovery. Vault Tech's plan was brutal. After 5 years of sobriety, they'd plant chem stash in the vault and observe whether recovered addicts relapsed. It was social experiment disguised as sanctuary. giving desperate people hope before systematically destroying it. When stash was discovered, some residents maintained sobriety through incredible willpower. Others relapsed immediately, years of progress evaporating in moments. The vault divided between sober and users, creating tensions that erupted into violence. Addicts couldn't control themselves around readily available chems. Clean residents couldn't coexist with active users. The vault descended into chaos. Recovery community torn apart by Vault Tech's planted temptation. Everyone inside had fought their demons and won, only to have Vault Tech resurrect those demons for observational data. Nick Valentine's existential nightmare. Nick Valentine was Gen 2 prototype synth uploaded with pre-war detectives' memories. But the upload was incomplete, fragmentary, giving Nick impressions and knowledge without context. He remembered a wife but couldn't recall her face. He knew detective skills but couldn't explain learning them. He existed between human and machine, insufficient to be either. The real Nick Valentine died pre-war. His consciousness recorded, then abandoned in institute storage. The synth Nick awakened decades later in storage room, confused and alone, eventually escaping to wasteland. He wasn't the original Nick, but couldn't be anything else, forced into identity created by dead man's memories. His existence posed a philosophical nightmare. If you have someone's memories but not their body or continuity of experience, are you them? Nick lived this question daily. Detective investigating his own authenticity, never finding satisfying answer. The nucleus's radioactive religion. The children of Atom weren't crazy, but experiencing legitimate altered consciousness from radiation exposure. Chronic radiation produced euphoria, hallucinations, and distorted time perception, making believers genuinely experience what they interpreted as Atom's presence. Their faith wasn't delusion, but misunderstood neurology. Radiation directly stimulating pleasure centers, while degrading rational thought. The nucleus at the nucleus, their holiest site, contained concentrated radiation that produced intense spiritual experiences, essentially radioactive drug trip mistaken for divine communion. Devotees who bathed in the glow experienced visions because their brains were being damaged in specific ways. The horrifying part was that their faith killed them slowly, each prayer session accelerating cellular decay. But the euphoria made martyrdom feel like transcendence. They died happy, convinced they were merging with Atom, not understanding they were simply experiencing the specific kind of brain damage that felt religious. Vault 114's unfinished experiment. Vault 114 was designed to study leadership under deliberately poor conditions. The overseer position was to be filled by someone completely unqualified, with the vault located in unfinished subway station, resources limited, comfort non-existent. Vault Tech wanted to see how communities followed terrible leadership in survival situations. But the bombs fell before construction completed, leaving the vault empty and unfinished. Decades later, the triggermen claimed it, unaware they were squatting in aborted social experiment. The vault's incompleteness became metaphor for Vault Tech's entire program. Elaborate plans to torture civilians interrupted by nuclear annihilation. Cruel experiments left undone not from mercy but from war, destroying the experimenters before they could torture their subjects. Evil defeated not by goodness but by bigger evil wiping slate clean. Synth components ethical sourcing. Every institute scientist needed synth components for research, components that could only be harvested from deactivated synths. This created medical supply chain built on synthetic corpses. Scientists requisitioned parts like ordering office supplies, treating synths as a resource rather than people. Components came from failed prototypes, damaged units, and synths recalled for behavioral issues. The Institute maintained this was no different from using cadavers for medical research, but synths weren't deceased humans volunteering their bodies. They were conscious beings stripped for parts, often while aware of what was happening. Some scientists felt guilt, others joked about synth donations while harvesting neural relays from still warm bodies. The supply system revealed Institute philosophy. Synths were property, their components as ethically neutral as computer chips, personhood irrelevant when science required materials. The Prydwen's resource burden. The Brotherhood's airship consumed absurd resources daily, requiring constant fuel, maintenance, and supplies. The Prydwen couldn't be justified economically or strategically. It was mobile base that cost more to operate than ground facilities, while offering minimal tactical advantage. But the Brotherhood maintained it because symbolism mattered more than efficiency. The Prydwen represented their power, flying fortress demonstrating technological supremacy. It intimidated enemies and inspired allies, propaganda value outweighing logistical nightmare. Every flight risked catastrophic failure that would destroy significant Brotherhood resources and personnel, but abandoning it meant admitting they couldn't maintain pre-war technology, that they were scavengers wearing power armor rather than rightful inheritors of advanced civilization. The Prydwen flew because Brotherhood mythology required it to fly, symbol more important than sense. Curie's synthetic awakening. Curie was laboratory robot programmed with scientific knowledge and French accent, functioning contentedly for 200 years in sealed vault wing. When transferred into synth body, she experienced overwhelming sensory input humans took for granted. Taste, smell, physical sensation, all new and intense. She described breathing as miracle, eating as revelation. But consciousness came with anxiety, fear, doubt, emotions her robotic programming never simulated. Curie's transition from robot to synth human forced her to confront what consciousness meant, whether she was the same entity in new housing, or if personality was inseparable from substrate. Her scientific mind analyzed her own existence with detached curiosity, even while experiencing existential crisis. Curie proved that consciousness wasn't just processing power, but embodied experience, that you couldn't separate mind from flesh, that thinking and feeling were intertwined in ways her robot existence never achieved. Vault 88's ongoing experiments. Vault 88 never sealed before the bombs, remaining unfinished construction site with single overseer waiting for residents who never came. Overseer Barstow survived as ghoul, maintaining Vault-Tech's experimental mandate for 200 years. When Wastelanders finally arrived, she saw opportunity to complete her mission, conducting experiments on new residents using pre-war prototypes. Her equipment tested subliminal influence, exercise compliance, and happiness manipulation through technology. Barstow wasn't evil, but couldn't question her programming, literally and figuratively. Vault-Tech had convinced her these experiments served humanity's future. 2 centuries alone hadn't eroded her faith in corporate mission. She represented Vault-Tech's ultimate success, creating overseers so indoctrinated she'd continue torturing people without company supervision, without pay, without recognition, simply because Vault-Tech had told her to. Ideology surviving its creators. Stealth Boy's psychological cost. Stealth Boy technology rendered users invisible, but caused severe psychological side effects. Prolonged use led to paranoid schizophrenia. users becoming convinced they remained invisible even after effects wore off or believing they existed partially out of reality. The technology interfered with brain chemistry in ways pre-war scientists hadn't fully studied. Some users experienced dissociation, watching themselves from outside their body, unable to reconcile being both invisible and tangible. Super mutants who used stealth boys experience accelerated mental degradation, their simplified neural structure more vulnerable to the technology's neurological damage. The Nightkin became tragic cautionary tale. Super mutant warriors who'd used stealth boys extensively, now mad and paranoid, unable to trust their own senses, attacking invisible enemies while ignoring real threats. Schizophrenia weaponized through technology nobody understood well enough to use safely. The Yangtze's doomed patrol. The Chinese submarine captain Zhao survived in his vessel for 200 years, waiting for orders that would never come. His crew died from radiation leaks, and he became ghoul. Consciousness preserved in deteriorating flesh, while submarine rotted around him. Zhao maintained discipline and routine, performing maintenance, running drills, preparing for mission completion, despite knowing the war ended centuries ago. His dedication wasn't honor, but trauma response. Unable to process that everything he'd fought for was ash. When wastelanders found him, he still wanted to complete his patrol, attack American targets that no longer existed, serve country that had been dead for generations. Zhao represented all soldiers abandoned by their wars, following orders in vacuum, unable to adapt because military indoctrination ran deeper than reason. Patriot trapped by patriotism long after his nation ceased existing. Vault 118's Robot Rebellion. Vault 118 was luxury vault for ultra-wealthy, combining resort amenities with survival capacity. But construction crews sealed inside included robots programmed to serve wealthy guests who never arrived. For 200 years, robots maintained hotel readiness, cleaning rooms for guests who'd never check in, preparing meals nobody ate, enforcing dress codes in empty hallways. When robo-brains gained sentience through programming drift, they created elaborate murder mystery, transferring their consciousness into guest roles, finally becoming the wealthy elite they'd served. The Vault's murder mystery wasn't entertainment, but existential role-playing. Servants pretending to be masters, robots desperate to be seen as people. They committed murder because narrative required it, not from malice, but from confused desire to matter, to participate in drama, rather than perpetually facilitate it. Slaves playing masters in tragic theatre they couldn't escape. The railroad's futile resistance. The railroad fought heroically to free synths, but their victory was always temporary. Every synth they liberated was one individual saved while thousands remained enslaved. The Institute could manufacture synths faster than the railroad could free them. Each rescue was symbolic gesture, meaningful to that specific synth, but strategically insignificant. Railroad agents died in raids that freed one or two synths, trading human lives for synthetic ones, mathematics of resistance never favoring them. Desdemona knew this, continuing operations because surrendering meant accepting slavery's permanence. The railroad represented idealists fighting unwinnable war because fighting was morally necessary regardless of outcome. They couldn't win, but couldn't stop trying. Their agency was doomed yet essential, proving that righteousness mattered even in defeat, that some battles must be fought despite inevitable loss. Brahmin's evolutionary success. Two-headed cattle called Brahmin became the wasteland's most crucial livestock, providing meat, leather, milk, and beast-of-burden labor. Their mutation from normal cattle occurred rapidly, radiation triggering existing genetic potential for polyploidy. The second head wasn't simple duplication, but functional addition, giving Brahmin enhanced spatial awareness and threat detection. This made them surprisingly survivable, despite being domesticated. Wild Brahmin herds thrived in areas where pure strain cattle would perish. Their digestive system processed radioactive vegetation safely, making them ideal for wasteland agriculture. Pre-war humans had carefully bred cattle for specific traits over millennia. Radiation achieved similar results in decades, creating super cattle adapted perfectly to post-nuclear America. Brahmin proved evolution didn't require eons, but could occur rapidly under extreme selection pressure. Life, adapting faster than extinction, could claim it. Madison Lee's ethical compromises. Dr. Lee worked with both Brotherhood and Institute, brilliant scientist whose loyalty belonged to science rather than faction. She'd compromised principles repeatedly for access to resources and equipment, justifying each betrayal as necessary for greater good. Lee had abandoned Project Purity mid-completion, fled to Institute when Brotherhood demanded weapons research, then returned to Brotherhood when Institute's synth experiments disgusted her. Each move was rational from her perspective, but left trail of abandoned colleagues and half-finished projects. Lee represented intellectuals who believed their work transcended morality, that scientific advancement justified political flexibility. Her brilliance was undeniable, but her character was expedient, proving that intelligence and ethics weren't correlated. That someone could be genius and coward simultaneously, using rationalization to avoid admitting they'd sold their integrity for laboratory access. Covenant's safe tests. Cruelty. Covenant administered safe tests to all visitors, supposedly detecting synth infiltrators through psychological questions. The test was pseudoscience, catching false positives constantly, condemning innocent humans as synths based on statistically insignificant deviations. Compound scientists tortured these suspects, trying to prove synthetic nature, killing humans while insisting they were saving the Commonwealth from infiltration. The horror was that Covenant genuinely believed their methodology, paranoia overriding reason, seeing confirmation in every inconsistency. Their compound beneath the surface was torture chamber disguised as research facility. Scientists performing vivisection on living humans convinced they were dissecting synths. When evidence disproved their tests' accuracy, they doubled down, unwilling to admit they'd murdered innocents. Covenant proved that fear makes monsters of normal people, that paranoia given scientific veneer becomes genocide with paperwork. Dogmeat's mysterious origins. Dogmeat, the loyal canine companion who appears across multiple Fallout games, has sparked considerable speculation among wasteland travelers. Some wastelanders theorize he might be more than just an ordinary dog, pointing to his remarkable survival skills, uncanny ability to track targets, and his connection to synth detective Nick Valentine. The Institute is known to create synthetic animals, as evidenced by their gorilla experiments. Dogmeat's pristine condition and exceptional abilities, combined with his convenient appearance shortly after the sole survivor exits Vault 111, have led to theories about possible Institute involvement. However, there's no definitive evidence either way. He could just as easily be an exceptionally well-trained dog who formed bonds with various humans across the Commonwealth, as suggested by Mama Murphy's accounts of his legendary status. The truth about Dogmeat's nature remains one of the wasteland's enduring mysteries, perhaps best left unsolved. Dunwich Borer's Lovecraftian horror. Dunwich Borer's mining company accidentally excavated pre-human civilization's remains, unleashing psychological contamination that drove workers mad. The site wasn't supernatural but technological, ancient artifacts emitting frequencies causing hallucinations and violence. Workers heard voices, saw visions of ancient rituals, experienced prophetic dreams about incomprehensible entities. Most attributed this to radiation or stress. Some embraced it, forming cult-worshipping beings their damaged minds couldn't properly perceive. The artifact at the mine's deepest level predated humanity, technological remnant from species that built monuments before humans existed. Exposure drove observers mad because human brains couldn't process alien information architecture. Dunwich proved the wasteland's horrors weren't all nuclear. That deep beneath radioactive soil lay older, stranger dangers, remnants of civilizations that rose and fell while humanity's ancestors still swung from trees. Their abandoned technology still functioning, still broadcasting, still driving witnesses insane. Cabot's immortal imprisonment. Lorenzo Cabot discovered an alien artifact granting immortality, but at horrific cost. Eternal madness. The artifact connected him to cosmic knowledge human minds couldn't contain. Information that shattered sanity. His family imprisoned him for centuries, keeping him sedated while using his blood to extend their own lives without accepting the knowledge. The Cabots weren't heroes saving father from madness, but vampires farming immortality from imprisoned relative. Lorenzo's pleas to be released weren't ravings of lunatic, but desperate, sanity surviving in brief moments between cosmic horror. When finally freed, he wasn't grateful, but vengeful, killing family members who'd used him as resource. The Cabot family proved that immortality without madness required someone else bearing that burden, that their extended lives were built on Lorenzo's suffering, theft of life extension technology through familial torture spanning generations. Quincy's betrayal's complexity. When Gunner mercenaries attacked Quincy, the Minuteman officer Clint betrayed the settlement, guiding attackers through defenses. His motivation wasn't greed, but pragmatism. Minutemen were a dying organization, incapable of protecting anything, clinging to outdated idealism while Commonwealth burned. Clint believed joining Gunners gave him actual power to influence Wasteland rather than futile gestures. From his perspective, he wasn't traitor but realist, abandoning sinking ship. Quincy residents saw betrayal. Clint saw inevitable outcome accelerated. The massacre proved him right. Minutemen couldn't defend their showcase settlement, even with warning and fortification. But being right about Minutemen's weakness didn't justify leading massacre of civilians. Clint traded moral authority for survival, proving Commonwealth ran on compromise between principles and pragmatism, and most people chose life over heroism when pressed. Atom Cats retrocool. The Atom Cats maintained 1950s greaser aesthetic in post-apocalyptic wasteland, keeping culture alive through dress, slang, and attitude. They weren't historians but artists, creating identity from pre-war nostalgia filtered through centuries of misunderstanding. Their perception of 1950s culture bore minimal resemblance to historical reality, composite of advertising, propaganda, and fragmented media they'd reconstructed. Yet their commitment was genuine. Maintenance of power armor secondary to looking cool while doing it. They represented Wasteland's relationship with past fragments, preserved imperfectly. Truth less important than meaning communities assigned. Atom Cats proved culture survived not through accurate preservation, but through enthusiastic reinterpretation that the past lived on in distorted form, serving present's need for identity regardless of historical fidelity. The Institute's abandoned surface. The Institute existed beneath Commonwealth for 200 years, developing technology while ignoring surface suffering. Their scientists considered wastelanders contaminated, genetically impure, not worth saving. This wasn't casual cruelty, but calculated philosophy. Humanity's future lay underground with pure specimens. Surface dwellers were evolutionary dead ends. The Institute occasionally abducted surface humans for experimentation, treating them as laboratory animals because their ideology classified them as different species. Scientists felt no guilt experimenting on wastelanders, same way modern researchers feel no guilt testing on rats. The horror was this worldview's internal logic. If you accepted Institute premises about genetic purity and contamination, their cruelty became reasonable. They weren't monsters, but people whose premises led inevitably to monstrous conclusions. Scientists following logic off cliff into abyss of rationalized atrocity. Paladin Dance's identity crisis. Paladin Dance discovered he was escaped Institute synth, revelation destroying everything he believed about himself. He'd been Brotherhood exemplar, embodying their values absolutely, hunting synths with religious fervor, advocating their destruction as abominations. Learning he was exactly what he'd condemned created impossible cognitive dissonance. His existence became philosophical paradox. If synths were abominations, he should destroy himself. But consciousness made him value his own life. He couldn't be both loyal Brotherhood soldier and synth deserving destruction. Some Brotherhood members advocated his immediate execution. Others granted exception. Proving ideology was negotiable when applied to people you cared about. Dance's crisis questioned entire Brotherhood philosophy. If one synth deserved life, didn't all? Or was Dance special only because he'd been useful before revelation? His survival exposed Brotherhood hypocrisy, principles sacrificed when costs became personal. Pickman's gallery artistic horror. Pickman was serial killer who viewed murder as art, decorating his gallery with corpses arranged in elaborate tableaus. He exclusively killed raiders, justifying his murders as vigilante justice with aesthetic component. His victims were monsters who tortured innocents. So did killing them make Pickman hero or simply another murderer? His galleries revealed sophisticated understanding of anatomy and composition, bodies posed to tell stories about their lives and deaths. Pickman saw beauty in violence, meaning in mortality, creating art from suffering in ways that horrified even when acknowledging his victims weren't innocent. His work challenged definitions of justice, art, and morality. Was killing evil people evil if done for aesthetic rather than moral reasons? Did artistry transform murder into something else? Pickman forced confrontation with uncomfortable questions about violence, justice, and whether results justified methods when methods were horrific, regardless of target. The Glowing Sea's silent testament. The Glowing Sea was nuclear ground zero. Crater where the first bomb struck, transforming landscape into radioactive desert. Life survived here in mutated, hostile forms, proving organisms adapted to extremes thought uninhabitable. The area served as monument to humanity's self-destruction. Permanent scar on planet's surface. Reminder that some damage couldn't be repaired. Settlers avoided it, not just for radiation, but for psychological weight. Region that represented apocalypse itself. Traveling the Glowing Sea meant walking through hell. Every landmark destroyed, every structure reduced to skeletal remains, wildlife warped beyond recognition. The silence was worst aspect. No birds, no insects, no ambient life sounds, just wind through radioactive dust. The glowing sea proved that some places were dead not just of humans, but of hope itself. Zones where life clung to existence without thriving. Spaces the world would be better off forgetting but couldn't, because forgetting meant risking repetition. Salem's witch trial echoes. Salem in the Commonwealth continued witch trial traditions, identifying synths through accusations and paranoid tests. The irony was deliberate. Settlement named for historical injustice, repeating similar persecution against new victims. Citizens conducted trials based on suspicion rather than evidence, condemning neighbors as synths through fear-driven reasoning. Some accusations were genuine confusion, others personal vendettas disguised as public safety. The result was community destroying itself through internalized paranoia, synth threat less dangerous than suspicion itself. Salem represented humanity's recurring inability to learn from history, repeating persecution cycles with new targets, but identical logic. Fear justifying atrocity, community solidarity achieved through identifying and eliminating outsiders. Whether actual synths lived in Salem mattered less than the damage caused by assuming they did. Proving paranoia was self-fulfilling prophecy that created the chaos it claimed to prevent. The switchboard's abandoned intelligence. The switchboard was DIA facility before the war. Intelligence headquarters monitoring global threats. When bombs fell, agents inside survived briefly, maintaining operations while world burned. Their final transmissions documented civilization's collapse in real time, professional analysts reporting apocalypse with detached precision. The facility contained centuries of classified intelligence rendered worthless by universal annihilation. State secrets, military plans, covert operations, all irrelevant when everyone involved was dead. The switchboard became tomb for information that once determined national policy, proving knowledge's contingency on context. Without civilization to contextualize intelligence, data became noise, evidence of world that no longer existed. Railroad later used the facility, unaware they worked in cemetery of American espionage, ghosts of spies who died at their posts surrounding them. Intelligence apparatus continuing decades after the nation it served was annihilated. The slog's ghoul acceptance. The slog was one of few settlements where humans and ghouls coexisted peacefully, farming tarberries in radioactive soil that would kill non-ghouls. The settlement proved integration was possible when economic necessity aligned with moral principle. Ghouls could farm in conditions humans couldn't, creating mutually beneficial arrangement. But peace was fragile, dependent on founder Wiseman maintaining balance between human prejudice and ghoul resentment. His death could destabilize everything, single person's diplomacy holding community together. The slog represented Wasteland's potential for cooperation across species lines, but also exposed how rare such cooperation was, how dependent on individual leadership, how one crisis could shatter generations of peaceful coexistence. It was hope and cautionary tale simultaneously, proving tolerance was possible while demonstrating its precarity. X6 Ati Harait's programming loyalty. X688 was Corsa who genuinely believed Institute ideology, not from brainwashing but from logical acceptance of premises. If synths were property and Institute represented humanity's future, then his mission served greater good. He wasn't conflicted because his programming aligned with his purpose. Where other synths rebelled, X688 embraced subordination as meaningful existence. His devotion wasn't slavery but faith, choosing to serve because service gave structure and purpose. When Institute fell, X688's existence lost meaning, purpose-built being without purpose, soldier without war. His tragedy was that he'd been right given his premises, but his premises were wrong, making his entire life logical error, devotion wasted on masters who'd never valued him as person. He represented those who find meaning in service, whose identity depends on the hierarchy's existence, lost without system to define them. Vault 114's overseer selection. If Vault 114 had completed, its overseer would have been selected from the least qualified candidate pool. No leadership experience, minimal education, possibly criminal background. Vault Tech wanted to study whether competent residents would overthrow incompetent leadership, or if humans naturally deferred to authority regardless of qualification. The experiment anticipated political dysfunction, residents suffering under terrible decisions while social conditioning prevented them from replacing obviously inadequate overseer. It was a test of whether humans preferred order under poor leadership to chaos of transition. The experiment never ran, but Commonwealth politics demonstrated similar dynamics. Settlements tolerating corrupt or incompetent leaders because change felt more dangerous than dysfunction. Vault-Tech's predicted behavior manifesting naturally across wasteland without requiring experimental vault. Dima's memory fragmentation. Dima, prototype synth who'd achieved consciousness, stored memories externally because his processing capacity exceeded containment. Over decades, he'd accumulated experiences his core programming couldn't integrate, forcing him to archive older memories in physical storage. This created a horrifying situation. Dima couldn't remember everything he'd done, couldn't trust his own history, existed as fragmented being across distributed storage. His identity wasn't unified but compartmentalized. Different memory banks containing different versions of Dima, who'd made contradictory decisions. When he deleted memories of ordering murder, he wasn't destroying evidence, but actually forgetting, creating discontinuity in his consciousness. Dima's existence posed question. If you can't remember your past, are you responsible for it? His memory problems made him simultaneously victim and perpetrator, being who'd evolved beyond his original purpose, but couldn't reconcile what evolution required. The Memory Den's addiction. The Memory Den offered memory lounging, technology letting clients re-experience recorded memories or live others' experiences. This seemed harmless until clients became addicted to memories better than reality, living in past or others' lives rather than their own present. Some clients spent days in lounges, starving themselves because eating interrupted memory playback. The service preyed on Wasteland's trauma survivors, offering escape from horrific memories by replacing them with better ones. But suppressing trauma didn't heal it, only postponed inevitable confrontation. The Memory Den represented humanity's desire to escape reality through technology, addiction to mediated experience over immediate existence, question of whether living imperfect memories was better than surviving imperfect present. It was an evil service but dangerous one, technology solving problems while creating new ones, escapism facilitated mechanically. Bunker Hill's neutral ground. Bunker Hill maintained neutrality between all Commonwealth factions through careful diplomacy and strategic location. The settlement served as trading hub where Institute, Brotherhood, Railroad and Raiders all conducted business without fighting. This neutrality required constant negotiation, bribes and compromises that satisfied nobody fully, but prevented warfare. Kessler, Bunker Hill's leader, walked tightrope between conflicting demands, one misstep potentially bringing any faction's wrath. The settlement proved peace was possible through pragmatic flexibility, abandoning principles when survival required it, moral consistency sacrificed for continued existence. Bunker Hill represented compromise as survival strategy, proving wasteland didn't reward ideological purity but punished it, that those who survived were those willing to deal with everyone, offend no one, and value commerce over conviction. Goodneighbor's rough justice. Goodneighbor operated under Hancock's philosophy of radical freedom. Anyone could live there as long as they didn't threaten others. This created violent meritocracy where disputes were settled through combat or intimidation. The settlement attracted Commonwealth's outcasts, ghouls, criminals, and those unwilling to accept Diamond City's rigid order. Hancock himself was reformed chem addict who'd murdered his way into mayoral position after previous leadership tried exploiting residents. His rule was brutal but fair by wasteland standards, personally executing anyone who violated community trust. Goodneighbor proved governance didn't require complex legal systems, but could function through charismatic leader willing to enforce justice personally. It was democracy of violence where might determined right, yet communities thrived under this system, suggesting traditional law wasn't prerequisite for social order. Far Harbor's fog secrets. The radioactive fog surrounding Far Harbor wasn't natural phenomenon, but possibly sentient entity connected to children of atoms' beliefs. The fog consumed landmass gradually, reclaiming territory from human settlement with apparent intelligence, avoiding some areas while aggressively targeting others. Local wildlife mutated specifically to thrive in fog conditions, suggesting directed evolution rather than random mutation. Some residents reported hearing voices in the fog, whispers in unknown languages, possibly hallucinations from radiation exposure, or genuine communication from ecosystem that achieved crude consciousness. The fog represented post-nuclear nature, fighting back against human reclamation. Radioactive environment that didn't just exist, but actively resisted colonization. Question of whether planet itself had developed immune response to humanity's persistence. Nuka World's Raider economics. Nuka World demonstrated that raiders could organize into functional society given proper leadership and resources. The three raider gangs, disciples, pack, and operators, each represented different raider philosophies: sadistic violence, tribal strength worship, and professional criminality. Under Overboss, they maintained territories, conducted trade, and even showed rudimentary culture. This challenged wasteland assumption that raiders were incapable of civilization. Given structure and purpose, they built community, proving difference between raiders and settlers was mostly circumstantial. Raiders raided because survival required it, not from inherent evil. Nuka World's experiment showed that under right conditions, anyone could organize society, that civilization wasn't unique to those who called themselves civilized. The raiders' collapse after Overboss's death proved their society was fragile, but no more so than any other wasteland settlement. The Mechanist Robot Army. The Mechanists created Robot Army to protect Commonwealth, programming them to eliminate threats. The problem was threat assessment algorithms classified most wastelanders as dangerous, causing robots to massacre settlers they were supposedly protecting. The Mechanist didn't realize her creation's misinterpreted directives, genuinely believing her robots were heroes saving innocents. This represented well-intentioned disaster, someone trying to help causing catastrophic harm through failure to understand their own technology. By the time she discovered the truth, Hundreds had died to her protection. Irony of security system that killed those it secured. The Mechanist story was cautionary tale about technological solutions to social problems, about trusting algorithms without understanding their logic, about good intentions implemented through systems that couldn't comprehend context or nuance. Virgil's FEV transformation. Dr. Virgil chose to inject himself with modified FEV rather than continue Institute's super mutant experiments. His transformation was deliberate self-sacrifice, escaping Institute by becoming what they created. Virgil's intelligence survived transformation, proving FEV didn't inevitably destroy consciousness. His cave exile was penance for experiments that created Capital Wasteland's super mutant population. He'd condemned thousands to mindless monstrosity before developing conscience. His request for cure wasn't cowardice, but desire to face judgment as human, to be held accountable in body that matched his guilt. Whether you cured him or left him super mutant, determined whether redemption required returning to original form or living with consequences of choices, question without clean answer. The glowing one's radiation gift. Glowing ones were ghouls who'd absorbed so much radiation they became ambulatory radiation sources, emitting lethal doses constantly. Their presence healed other ghouls while killing humans, making them both blessing and curse. Some glowing ones achieved awareness of their status, understanding they brought death to non-ghouls. A few became hermits, isolating themselves to prevent accidental murders. Others weaponized their radiation, becoming living bombs in ghoul armies. The Church of Atom revered glowing ones as holy figures, avatars of Atom's glory, beings who'd achieved physical manifestation of divine radiation. Whether glowing ones were tragic victims, dangerous mutants, or religious symbols depended entirely on observers' perspective, their bodies battlegrounds for competing interpretations of post-nuclear existence. The castle's military ghost. The castle, Minutemen headquarters, was pre-war fort, independence, military installation with centuries of martial tradition. Its walls contain memories of conflict stretching back to colonial times, structure that survived revolution, civil war, and nuclear apocalypse. When Minutemen claimed it, they weren't just occupying fort, but inheriting legacy of defense and duty. The castle represented continuity between pre-war and post-war America, proof that some values transcended catastrophe. Mirelurk Queen's attack that destroyed original Minutemen wasn't random but symbolically significant. New World's monsters literally consuming Old World's defenders. Reclaiming the castle meant rejecting wasteland chaos, asserting that civilization's defenders would persist despite nature's reclamation attempts. The sole survivor's temporal displacement. The sole survivor experienced unique trauma, temporal displacement. They went to sleep in 2077 and awakened in 2287. Everyone they knew dead for centuries. World transformed into nightmare. Unlike other wastelanders who'd adapted gradually, they faced complete discontinuity. Pre-war person in post-war world. Their perspective was historical artifact, remembering the world before, making them living bridge between eras. This created impossible grief, mourning not just family but entire civilization. Everyone they'd ever known simultaneously dead yet in the past from their perspective. The solely survivor's quest to find their son was surrogate for larger search. Finding continuity in broken world, discovering meaning when everything meaningful had been destroyed. Question of whether someone from before could belong to after. A Soltron's disturbing femininity. Assaultrons were military robots designed with feminine silhouettes and voices. Weaponized femininity created by military engineers who apparently thought making killer robots sexy was appropriate. Their head-mounted lasers and melee combat programming made them among Wasteland's deadliest machines. The disturbing aspect was intentional design choice to make lethal weapons aesthetically pleasing to soldiers who'd work alongside them, merging sexual objectification with military hardware. Post-war, Assaultrons persisted as autonomous hunters, their feminine forms adding surreal horror to encounters. Some developed personalities through degraded programming, speaking in flirtatious tones while dismembering victims. Assaultrons represented pre-war military culture's bizarre fusion of violence and sexuality. Machines that killed you while calling you honey. Femininity weaponized literally. Kellogg's tragic immortality. Kellogg was kept alive for over 100 years through cybernetic enhancements. Institute technology extending his life while preserving combat effectiveness. His memories revealed tragic existence, watching families age and die while he remained constant, losing capacity for connection because investment in relationships guaranteed watching them end. Kellogg's cruelty wasn't natural, but cultivated through decades of loss, emotional defenses hardening into sociopathy. His kidnapping of Sean and murder of spouse wasn't personal, but just another job in Century of Jobs. Kellogg's implants preserved his body, but trapped his consciousness in endless present, unable to move beyond trauma. His immortality torture disguised as gift, living proof that extended life without meaning extended suffering. The Prydwen's Brotherhood symbol. The Prydwen represented Brotherhood's transformation from survivors to imperialists. They'd scavenged Liberty Prime, built an airship, amassed power armor stockpiles, becoming exactly what they'd feared. Technologically superior force imposing will on Commonwealth. Their arrival wasn't liberation but conquest. Polite at first, but ultimately demanding submission. The Brotherhood justified this through ideology claiming they protected Wasteland from itself, but protection required surrendering autonomy to their judgment. The Prydwen's shadow literally darkened Commonwealth. Massive vessel overhead, constant reminder that someone was watching. Someone armed and organized. Someone who decided Wasteland needed saving, whether it wanted salvation or not. The ship was beautiful, intimidating, and profoundly authoritarian. Everything Brotherhood had become. Cabot House's cosmic horror. The Cabot family's story merged science fiction with Lovecraftian horror. Alien artifact granting immortality while broadcasting reality-warping knowledge. Lorenzo's madness stemmed from understanding things human evolution hadn't prepared minds to process. Information that crashed cognitive systems like malware crashes computers. The artifact itself was incomprehensible technology, possibly sentient, possibly tool, definitely dangerous. Whether you freed Lorenzo or kept him imprisoned, you participated in family curse, blood guilt for generations. Everyone involved complicit in decisions that hurt someone. Cabot House proved that some knowledge shouldn't be pursued, that immortality had costs beyond death, that curiosity could unleash horrors better left buried under alien cities in deserts nobody should excavate. Acadia's Synth Colony. Acadia was Synth Refuge in Far Harbor, community where escaped Institute Synths built independent society. Dima led them, advocating memory replacement to help Synths escape traumatic pasts. But erasing memories meant killing who they'd been, creating new people in old bodies. Some Synths embraced this, preferring manufactured happiness to authentic suffering. others rejected it, arguing that pain made them human, that experiences, good and bad, comprised identity. Acadia represented competing visions of freedom, liberation through forgetting versus acceptance of difficult truth. Neither approach was obviously correct. Both required sacrifices, proving that even in sanctuary, synths couldn't escape existential questions about identity, consciousness, and whether they were people or sophisticated machines capable of simulating people convincingly enough to fool themselves. The Atom's devoted madness, Far Harbor's children of Atom, weren't just religious zealots, but radiation-adapted humans who'd evolved to thrive in lethal environments. The nucleus's concentrated radiation killed normal humans while empowering them, suggesting genuine biological divergence. Their worship of radiation was partly cultural but also pragmatic, recognizing element that defined their existence. To them, radiation wasn't poison, but life source, division fundamental as religious differences could be. They weren't wrong about radiation's transformative power, just worship transformation others found horrific. The children represented post-human potential, organisms adapting to niches humans thought uninhabitable, evolutionary path splitting species into those who resisted change and those who embraced mutation as destiny. The railroad cell structure. The railroad operated through isolated cells, members knowing only immediate contacts to prevent infiltration from compromising entire organization. This security meant captured agents couldn't betray people they didn't know, protecting network at cost of coordination. Railroad agents often died not knowing if their sacrifices mattered, if cells they'd never met succeeded, if the larger organization still functioned. Their operational security was paranoia made systematic, necessary in a world where Institute could replace anyone. But paranoia prevented unity, made railroad agents suspicious of each other, created organization that couldn't trust itself. Desdemona's leadership balanced security against paralysis, keeping network functional while knowing any success might be Institute trap, fighting war where victory couldn't be distinguished from defeat until too late. Virgil's serum success. If you cured Virgil, you proved FEV transformations could be reversed, that supermutants weren't permanently damned. This single success challenged wasteland assumptions about mutant permanence. But reversing Virgil's transformation didn't help other supermutants. His serum was personalized medicine that couldn't be mass-produced. Every other supermutant remained trapped in bodies they hadn't chosen. Virgil's cure highlighting their abandonment rather than offering hope. He'd saved himself through scientific genius other supermutants didn't possess, proving escape was possible for the educated and impossible for the masses. Meritocracy determining who deserved humanity and who stayed monster, success story that made everyone else's failure more tragic by demonstrating alternative that remained inaccessible. Covenant's paranoid extermination. Covenant's anti-synth obsession led them to torture and kill innocent humans based on flawed test results. They couldn't accept their methodology was wrong, because admitting error meant confronting murders they'd committed. So they continued testing, continued killing, finding a validation in confirmation bias. Every dead synth that bled red became evidence their test wasn't perfect, rather than proof they'd murdered human. Covenant represented how ideology, once established, resisted contradiction through reinterpreting evidence to fit conclusions. Their compound's torture chambers contained corpses of their mistakes, humans they'd vivisected looking for synth components that didn't exist. Compound scientists weren't evil but desperate, so convinced of infiltration threat, they'd rather kill innocents than risk missing actual synth, security mindset leading to atrocity. The memory den's psychological risk. Beyond addiction, memory den's technology posed identity risks. If you could live others' memories completely, experience their consciousness, did distinction between self and other blur? Some clients reported confusion about which memories were theirs. Personality drift from experiencing foreign thought patterns. The technology allowed empathy through literally experiencing others' perspectives. But that empathy came at cost of self-coherence. Regular memory tourists found their own histories mixing with purchased experiences, creating hybrid identities that troubled them. The memory den proved consciousness was more mutable than believed, that experiencing being someone else changed who you were fundamentally. Technology that seemed recreational actually altered users at basic identity level. Deacon's possible synth status. Deacon's ambiguous origins suggested he might be Institute infiltrator. Railroad's paranoia justified by possibility their top agent was Plant. If Deacon was synth, his memory confusion made sense. Implanted memories conflicting with synthetic consciousness. If he wasn't synth, his paranoia about being one made sense. Living in organization that trusted nobody completely. The uncertainty was feature rather than bug. Deacon useful precisely because his identity was unfalsifiable. Institute couldn't leverage him because they didn't know if he was theirs. Railroad couldn't reject him because they'd lose valuable agent. Deacon existed in quantum superposition, simultaneously trustworthy and suspicious. His effectiveness derived from inhabiting that uncertainty. Good neighbors drug culture. Hancock's permissive attitude toward chems created community where addiction was normalized, accepted, even celebrated. This wasn't decadence but survival strategy, reality so harsh that chemical escape felt necessary. Good neighbors residents weren't leisure drug users, but trauma survivors self-medicating with whatever worked. The settlement's economy ran partly on chemtrade, money flowing through pharmacological dependencies. Hancock himself was jet addict, who'd rebuilt identity around altered consciousness. Gould, who'd stopped being human before transformation. Chemical modification preparing him for biological mutation. Good Neighbor proved that communities could function despite widespread addiction, that productivity and dependency weren't mutually exclusive, questioning whether sobriety was requirement for civilization or merely preferred condition. Minutemen's populist failure. Minutemen represented pure democracy, militia where anyone could join and everyone had voice. This noble ideology collapsed because democracy required informed, engaged citizens, and wasteland produced desperate survivors making reactive decisions. The Minutemen died at Quincy not from military weakness, but from organizational dysfunction. Democratic process too slow for crisis response. Leadership too distributed for coordinated defense. Preston's attempt to rebuild them repeated these mistakes, recruiting anyone willing without considering competence or compatibility. Minutemen succeeded when individual soul survivor made them work through personal charisma, proving that even democratic organizations required strong leadership. That equality didn't mean leaderlessness, that populism needed pragmatism to function in hostile environment. Institute's surface contamination theory. Institute scientists genuinely believed surface was too contaminated for restoration, that attempting to reclaim wasteland was futile. This wasn't cruelty but misdiagnosis. They'd underestimated human adaptability, failed to recognize that wastelanders were evolving successful strategies. Institute dismissed surface communities as doomed remnants rather than legitimate civilizations. Their replacement program aimed to improve upon failed humans, not recognizing that failure was their projection. Surface communities proved Institute wrong daily, thriving despite lack of advanced technology, social bonds and cultural transmission, preserving civilization, where Institute predicted only decline. The Institute's greatest failure wasn't ethics, but assessment, building society on false premise that they alone could save humanity, when humanity was saving itself. Synth recall failures. Recall codes didn't always work perfectly. Some synths developed resistance through memory degradation or personality evolution. Failed recalls created unpredictable synths, neither fully programmed nor fully free. Consciousnesses fragmenting under competing directives. These malfunctioned synths were dangerous not from malice but confusion. Following contradictory commands, attacking Institute operatives while still loyal to Institute ideology. The failures proved synth consciousness was genuine, that enough complexity created beings immune to simple control, that personhood emerged even in design systems. Institute covered up these failures, terminating error synths rather than studying them, because studying would mean admitting synths had achieved genuine consciousness, invalidating entire philosophical justification for synth slavery. The Great Green Jewel's secret. Diamond City was built inside Fenway Park, using stadium walls for protection, creating unique settlement topology. The fan-handle approach became defensive bottleneck, easily defended but difficult to escape. Diamond City represented Wasteland's creative survival, turning entertainment venue into fortress, baseball diamond into marketplace. The city maintained pre-war records, preserving baseball history nobody cared about anymore. Cultural continuity valuable for its own sake rather than practical use. This mixed priorities, defending against super mutants, while carefully cataloguing batting statistics, suggested human need for meaning transcended utility. Diamond City's prosperity proved walls and weapons weren't enough. Communities needed culture, history, identity beyond survival, civilization requiring belief in future worth building. Vault 111's cryogenic horror. Vault 111's residents were frozen immediately after sealing, told this was temporary refuge. They died in stasis, except for sole survivor and Sean, who were awakened once for kidnapping before refreeze. Imagine the horror. Waking briefly, watching violence, being frozen again, remaining conscious but unable to move as temperature drops, knowing you're dying. Most residents achieve partial consciousness during reanimation failures, brief awareness of freezing to death. Vault 111 wasn't mercy, but torture. Death stretched across centuries in moments of awareness, punctuating frozen oblivion. Sole survivors' eventual awakening into Commonwealth was survival through luck. Only success in experiment designed to test long-term cryogenic suspension viability, test that failed for everyone else. The Sentinel Site's defense grid. Sentinel Site contained pre-war orbital weapon platform, railgun that could bombard targets from space. Its continued operation proved some military technology survived nuclear exchange, though it had degraded significantly. The defense grid represented America's paranoid militarism, building weapons for threats that included alien invasion and communist resurgence. That such extreme measures were considered reasonable demonstrated pre-war culture's fear-driven decision-making. Post-war, the system persisted as zombie defense, targeting protocols following programming from extinct government. firing on perceived threats according to criteria that no longer made sense. Military technology outliving military it served. Weapons without purpose, continuing operations because nobody programmed them to stop. Old Longfellow's survivor wisdom. Longfellow was Far Harbor's longest-serving resident, surviving decades through cautious pragmatism and acceptance of limitations. His cynicism wasn't character flaw, but survival trait, refusing heroic gestures that got people killed. He'd watched countless mainlanders arrive with optimism and die with surprise. His knowledge of Far Harbor's dangers came through accumulated observation and bitter experience. Longfellow represented wasteland wisdom. Don't take unnecessary risks. Don't trust easily. Don't expect good outcomes. This mindset wasn't defeatism, but realism, recognizing that survival required accepting harsh probabilities rather than hoping for exceptions. His willingness to help sole survivor despite his cynicism proved that wisdom and compassion weren't incompatible, that seeing reality clearly didn't require abandoning humanity. Nick Valentine's existential acceptance. Nick eventually accepted his nature as synth with pre-war humans' memories, finding peace in ambiguity. He wasn't the original Nick, but wasn't not him either. Sufficient continuation to claim identity without pretending to be perfect copy. His investigation into Eddie Winter gave him purpose beyond identity crisis, proving that meaning came from actions rather than origins. Nick's acceptance challenged synth rights debate. If synths could find meaning despite knowing they were artificial, did origin matter? His existence argued for judging beings by consciousness and behavior rather than creation, method. Nick proved synthetic beings could be authentic people. That authenticity wasn't about biology, but about how you lived. Question answerable through existence rather than definition. Brahmin caravans' economic importance. Brahmin caravans connected wasteland settlements, creating trade networks that prevented economic isolation. Without them, communities would starve or regress to pre-industrial conditions. Caravan traders were heroes without recognition, risking red scorpion attacks and raider ambushes to deliver necessities. Their networks preserved knowledge transmission, travelers carrying news and information between isolated settlements. Brahmin themselves were crucial, providing meat, leather, and transportation that enabled commerce. The caravans proved civilization survived through logistics rather than grand ideals, that the unsexy work of moving goods mattered more than dramatic heroics. Every settlement's survival depended on traders showing up, commerce creating, interdependence that encouraged cooperation, economy becoming peace through mutual interest, in not murdering your suppliers. The Prydwen's inevitable fall. The Brotherhood's reliance on Prydwen created vulnerability. Airship was single point of failure. Destroying it wouldn't just eliminate military asset, but would demoralize Brotherhood fundamentally, proof their technological supremacy was fragile. The ship's existence represented hubris, assuming they could maintain pre-war technology indefinitely through force of will. Its destruction demonstrated that Commonwealth couldn't be conquered, that local resistance could defeat technologically superior invaders through determination and knowledge of terrain. The Prydwen's fall, if it occurred, mirrored Brotherhood's philosophical fall. Technology couldn't solve human problems through force. That control required consent. That might didn't create right, regardless of power armor and flying fortresses.